Hi guys, welcome back. When I first started this channel in the peak of COVID in May of 2020, I started to talk about my own personal investing journey with the idea to try to show people that actually anybody can invest, no matter how small amount you invest every month. The key is consistency, and consistency grows small amounts into large pots of wealth. I wanted to document my own progress, and one of the key things that I wanted to do will show a yearly update as to how a portfolio has developed year after year after year. I've now decided to move away from Vanguard and have my ISA sat on Trading 212. I'll pop a video up above explaining exactly why I made that decision. But this means the end of the line for my old Vanguard portfolio updates. What I want to do today then is look back at each of my milestone updates. So year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 and year 5, following the progress of my Vanguard ISA. And this will kind of be the final Vanguard portfolio update, if you will. This is to try to show how consistency can grow over time. You'll see monthly portfolio updates from myself and other people on YouTube, but you might not see that incremental improvement and growth over time. So what I'm going to do today is condense each of those yearly portfolio updates so you can see the progress and where it sat back in 2020 when it was under £3,000 to where it sat at year 5 at coming up for £23,000. I apologise in advance for the audio quality in some of those earlier portfolio updates. That was when I was recording just on an iPhone without a microphone or anything. But I hope you enjoy seeing the progress of my portfolio today, and you can see that actually investing small amounts really can grow if you have a long enough time horizon. I'll see you in there. So here we are inside my Vanguard account. You can see that a year after starting my Vanguard ISA, the current value of the ISA is £2,809.62, and that equates to a personal rate of return of negative 0.03%. Now, bearing in mind all the things that have happened this year, what with the coronavirus and Brexit, I'm fairly happy with how my portfolio has performed, with it being up to as high as 16% positive, but also down to negative 27% at some points. So to finish off the year, my first year investing, kind of breaking even as to where to the amount of money that I've put in, I'm fairly happy with that, and I'll take that moving forwards. If we have a look at the performance of my portfolio in a bit more detail, we can see that the negative 0.03% equates to a 38 pence loss throughout the year. Here you can see that the majority of my losses have come from the FTSE 100, which has been hit particularly hard this year. My best performing fund is the FTSE Developed Asia Pacific ex-Japan ETF. However, I did only start investing in this fund after the downturn, and therefore the 10% in growth you can see is that bounce back that we saw. It's the same story for the FTSE Emerging Markets. Again, I invested in this fund after the dip, and you can see that since that, I've had quite a nice rate of return of just under 5%. The fund that I'm probably most pleased with this year is the S&P 500, which is well renowned for its continual growth year on year. Despite the coronavirus and everything else that's been happening, I've seen just under an 8% rate of return this year, which is really pleasing. In addition to that, the fund's paid me £6.70 in dividends as well, which I've reinvested back into the S&P 500. And finally, moving on to the life strategy, this is the fund that I've been invested in the longest. This was the first fund that I invested in when opening my Vanguard portfolio. Again, you can see I've made a small loss here. However, all things considered, I'm still fairly happy with the performance throughout the year. Vanguard is well renowned for the cheapness of its fees, and that's really clear when looking at my investment calculations throughout the year. Bearing in mind I've invested £2,810 throughout the year, I've only paid £2.17 in fees. On top of that, I've gained £19.42 in dividends, so the dividends alone more than pay for the charges from Vanguard. Now let's further break down my holdings. You can see that 40% of my portfolio is made up of the Vanguard Life Strategy 100% Equity Fund. For this product I pay an ongoing fee of 0.22%, and I currently have just over 5.1 units in the fund. Finally, we've got the S&P 500, which is well renowned for having one of the longest bull markets in history. Throughout 2019, it increased from just around £42 per unit, all the way up to a high of £50. So when you compare this ETF to the FTSE Asia ex-Japan and the FTSE 100, you can see that this is tracking in an upwards trend, as opposed to tracking sideways. This shows the strength of the American market, and shows why I'm going to continue to invest in the S&P 500. Again, I've invested in this fund throughout the year, and then following the market fall as well, and you can see there's been some quite strong recovery since mid-March. You can see that shown in the graph here. It's made steady increases throughout the year, which is partly due to my continual investment, and also partly due to my dividend reinvestment strategy, along with a little bit of capital growth, up until around March, when obviously the market had a quite severe downturn. But since then, it's grown quite quickly out the other side. Again, you've seen in other videos that I've made quite a lot of investments over the last 2 months, around £1,000, because it's a really cheap buying opportunity. So that, combined with a market rally, has seen my portfolio grow back to break-even point. Throughout the year, I've invested £2,810, and that equates to around £235 a month.
If we hop straight into my Vanguard account, then you'll be able to see that my Vanguard portfolio is now worth £7,803.99. My time-weighted personal rate of return currently sits at 37.19%. My largest holding is still, of course, the S&P 500, which currently sits at £2,481.27. But at the top, you can see that I've currently invested £6,740 throughout the longevity of this account being open, and that has returned to me £1,063.99. Here you can see the overall growth of my account since May of 2019, where I initially invested around £500, and you can see over time that's grown significantly, of course still continuing to pound cost average in, following through coronavirus, where I took a nasty dip down to negative 27% rate of return at some points, which was fairly scary for a new investor, having invested for only around 8 months at that point. So I invested throughout that period, and you can see since coronavirus, since the markets have become much more buoyant, we've seen that grow and continue to go from strength to strength all the way out of 2020 and then into 2021 as well. There's been a slight dip, as I said, throughout this period in May, but again, continuing to invest in, and I've found that this has been the best strategy for me to follow throughout that period of time. The total capital gain that I've made throughout this period of time is just under £1,000 at around £971. The dividend income that I've had throughout that 2 years is £83.64, and that is far and away above any interest that I could have expected to accrue through investing a similar amount into a savings account. So regardless of capital gains, the dividend income alone is far surpassing anything I could expect from a conventional method of saving. Next then, we'll hop in and have a look at the monthly data, and this breaks down all of my investments month on month, and it shows you the month by month basis of the income and the difference and variance in the value of the portfolio. If we look right back to May of last year, you'll be able to see that I've only had 5 negative months, and 7 of those months have been massively positive. If you look at the individual negative months, the worst month that I've had was October of 2020. In this month, I lost £94.91. The total capital gains or capital loss was £113. However, fortunately that month was a dividend paying month in which I made over £18 in dividends. On the other hand, if we look at the upside months, the smallest month is February of 2021, in which I made £42, and then the largest is November of 2020, in which my capital gains reached £384.31, and that is simply capital gains from leaving this money invested into my chosen investment funds. You can see then the value of investing and how quickly this can begin to snowball into making substantial amounts of money through capital gains every single month. My biggest winners are of course the S&P 500, which has netted me a rate of return of 43.43%, as well as the FTSE Developed Asia Pacific ex-Japan, which is up for me including dividends of over 44%. And that then in essence is a quick roundup of my overall portfolio. So it's 3 years to the day since I opened my Vanguard ISA, and I'll be honest, I've not been particularly looking forward to putting this video together because the market has taken a massive dump. Everything is down at the moment and my portfolio is absolutely no different. Here we are then inside my Vanguard account. You can see my ISA is currently valued at £10,889.11. You can see on screen my personal time-weighted rate of return has fallen all the way back to 22.01%. My largest holding is still in the S&P 500 with a weighting of 36.83% and a total value of £4,010.81. Without further ado then, let's jump in a little further and have a look at this mess. So we'll click on investments down the left-hand side as we do always, and you can see my current holdings. But before we do that, we're going to hop straight into the performance. You can see this over time then slowly increase as I was investing small amounts every single month, nothing major, until we got up to March of 2020, and then of course we had the COVID dip, which now comparatively to the end over here is not really that much of a dip at all. And you can see as the COVID pandemic disappeared or started to slow down, I managed to reap the rewards of investing a lot of capital during that time. Overall then in my portfolio, I have contributed almost £10,000 now in 3 years. So I've contributed £9,870 within that 3-year period. On average then, that's £3,290 a year, and my investments have returned to me £1,019.11, and obviously that sees me my total value of £10,889.11. However, the sad thing, I guess, brings a bit of a tear to my eye, is that my investments over the last year have grown by £40.71. And if you think about it, I've actually earned more in dividends than £40 this year. So I'm actually at a capital loss throughout the last year. If you have a look at the yearly calculations, you'll be able to see over the last year, I've paid £13 in charges. I've actually earned almost £160 in dividends. We can flick that now back to inception and you can have a look over the longevity of the portfolio. I've paid £20.60 in charges, dividends at £243, and obviously the capital investment, the unrealised capital gains of £778.20. So it's not all doom and gloom. So over the last 2 months, I've lost almost £800 from the value of my portfolio. That's, yeah, quite sad. And if you want to break it down even further and make me even more upset, if you look over here, so the bit I've just highlighted now, I was actually at a cumulative return of £1,900, so £1,919. That's including capital returns, capital gains, and dividends. And look, now we're at £1,019. So over the last, since December, my portfolio has actually lost £900 in unrealised return. It really doesn't make for positive reading, does it? But I'm sure all of your portfolios look like this as well. So rest assured, it's not just you out there who's struggling at the moment, it's also my portfolio. If you break it down and look at the investments as well, we can have a look at this on an investment basis. One positive, I guess, that's coming out of the interest rate rises is that I'm now earning interest on the cash that's stored within my Vanguard portfolio that's not put to use. So at the end of this video then, and 3 years to the day since I started investing, I've managed to generate a 5-figure ISA valued at £10,889.11. My personal rate of return is currently sat at 28.88%, which again has increased since my last portfolio update. My largest holding is still, of course, within the S&P 500, targeting around 50% of my overall ISA value. You can currently see that I own £7,832.81 of the VUSA, with a total weighting of 48.93%. About a month into the ISA year, I've so far invested £430 this tax year, and of course that's going to continue all the way through until next April. If you look at the performance tab, you'll be able to see exactly how much I've invested since opening this account. You can see I've currently invested £14,220 over the last 4 years, equating to around £3,500 per year or £300 per month. In that time, my investments have returned to me £1,789.63, and of course that's made up of capital gains, interest, and of course dividends. The growth graph here shows just how volatile the stock market can be, with peaks and troughs throughout my investing journey. So the COVID dip down here looks fairly small in comparison to some of the major drop-offs, some of the major kind of cliff edges that we've seen over the last year. But that's just because the drops now are far more substantial in terms of amounts and value size than they were back then. Click through to the calculations tab and we'll be able to see a detailed breakdown of the returns that I've received. And you'll be able to see that my current investment gain or loss currently invested is £944.95, which means I've currently got that amount of unrealised capital gains within my overall portfolio. I've crystallised £341.41 through the sale of my Life Strategy 100 around 18 months ago now, and my gross interest since opening this account is now £2.01. My dividends are actually looking very tasty indeed, and this portfolio has now received a total of £540.16 in dividends in just under 4 years. The total charges on the account in that time are just under £40 at £38.90, of course, all totaling up to the overall return that I've seen into my portfolio. By clicking on the monthly data, it will break down exactly what's happened over the last month, showing you how much you've invested and how much you've returned. And from looking at this data, you'll be able to see that actually I've managed to invest quite a bit over the last 2 months, with it being £680 in April and then just £50 so far this month. But actually the market gain or loss over the last few months, last 3 months really, has been pretty much nothing at all. In March, the portfolio lost, well, including dividends, including interest even, lost £12.04. In April, the portfolio gained £22.12, actually £88.86 if you include the £66.77 dividend. And then so far this month, we are 13 days into May, and the market has gained to me £7.11. So there we go then. I'm rounding up in May, 4 years after starting this investment portfolio and starting my own investing journey. And what a journey it's been. Essentially changed my life, made me consider looking at money in a completely different way, and made me realise that actually anybody can grow wealth for their own financial future. My portfolio, my Vanguard ISA, is currently sat at £16,009.63. And of course, over the next year, we're going to continue to invest in this portfolio cumulatively, along with Trading 212 and Coinbase, hoping to get myself to a position where I can have ultimate financial freedom. So my Vanguard ISA currently sits at a total value of £22,643.65, and that accounts for around 70% of my overall net worth. My personal rate of return is up massively to 67.71%, and my largest holding, still in the S&P 500, is now valued at £11,349. So we'll click through to inception and we'll see that my portfolio actually started on the 24th of May 2019. Today is of course the 29th of May 2024, but near as makes no difference, 5 years to the day. In that time, I've invested and contributed a total of £17,460 to this ISA. Throughout that time, my investment has returned to me £5,183.65. And the graph down the bottom here will show you actually how that looks over time. You'll notice, funnily enough, COVID on this graph as this little blip just down here, which looks insignificant now in comparison to some of the larger moves that we've seen more of late. If we pop through to the calculations tab, you'll be able to see my portfolio broken down in a little bit more detail. Again, over here, we've got my current market invested gain or loss. So I've currently got just over £4,000 in unrealised gain. Investments sold, this is when I sold out of a Life Strategy 100 about 3 or so years ago now. And I netted a profit of just over £340. My gross interest is just coming up for £4.50, so £4.47. My dividends, over the 5 years that I've invested, I've earned over £900 in dividends, sat at £907.26. And all of that for the small amount of charges of £72.95. And you can see that all equates to the total overall gain of £5,183.65. We'll click through to the month just so you can kind of see actually what's been going on over the last few months, because obviously we've not had an update of late. And this breaks it down from my opening balance to my closing balance, includes any fees, any charges that I've incurred, as well as any dividends that I've earned. So down the left-hand side, you've got the month, and you can see that actually since October or November even, we've had some really positive, really green months. Some months netting me over £700 of return. And I've seen that actually on 3 occasions in November, December, and February of this year as well. So it's been a really consistent and positive picture. What we'll also do is we'll click through to the investments tab over here. Again, make sure that it's set to inception. And this breaks down each of the individual investments that I currently hold. So I'm finishing this video, my portfolio is valued at £22,643.65, with me yet to make my May 2024 investment, and that sees a total personal rate of return of 67.71%. So there we have it then, watching my portfolio from year 1 through to year 5, growing from £2,809 all the way through to £22,643. Hopefully sequencing them like this will show the progression of it over time rather than just kind of a one point in time looking at different updates over time. You can see
from the start right through to where it was about a year ago now. And hopefully, if you are looking to get started investing, you don't think that you've got necessarily enough to get going, hopefully this shows that really anybody can do it. If you want to see my most recent portfolio update, you can see that one up here, where I expose my entire Trading 212 portfolio, which includes my Vanguard ETFs as well as my individual stocks and shares. And if you want to see all my future portfolio updates and all my other investing content, please do subscribe to the channel, like the video, and drop a comment down below as to how your first 5 years of investing went. And with that said, I'll see you in the next one.